How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
The detective said missing kids usually come home. What happens when they don't?
Based on a true story.
Police looking for John Gacy.
We discovered bodies. By the looks of it, they're younger men.
The things he did to those kids. He's sick.
The system failed these families.
Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Do you know how many there are?
Up to you to find out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of the Shift podcast, brought to you live from the Cunard stage at the Times and Sunday Times Cheltenham Literature Festival. I'm Sam Baker. I'm creator and host of the Shift podcast, and I am delighted to be here with the high street legend, the Queen of Shops, Mary Portas. Now, Mary, as you know, is one of the UK's most high-profile and innovative businesswomen. She made her name transforming dusty old Harvey Nichols into global fashion destination Harvey Nicks, leaving after a decade to found Portas, her own creative company, and helping to transform some of the many companies and brands who tried and failed to poach her over the years. Mary went from industry famous to on the street famous when over 3.5 million people turned into the BBC's Mary Queen of Shops back in 2007. And she's been a regular on our TVs ever since. She's advised the government on the future of high streets, created 26 Mary's Living and Giving shops for Save the Children, and written 6 books. But we're here to talk about those Harvey Nicks years and the book she's written about them in the heady whirl of the 90s. I shop, therefore I am. Mary takes us on a no-holds-barred journey from shop window to boardroom. It's a joyous, gossip-filled riot, but also a candid look at the childhood that shaped her, her passion for shops, not fashion, and crucially, how and why we shop. And in amongst that, we might get a wee bit emotional. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mary Portas. Get yourself comfortable there, love. So, before we get into your fabulous career, and it is really fabulous, I'm going to force you to talk about your childhood just a little bit and how it formed you, because you are very much formed by your childhood experience, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think most of us are, but I think particularly my parents were Irish who moved to the UK. My father was an only child, a Belfast Protestant, and my mother came from a farming family of 8 and was a Catholic, which went down like the proverbial cup of cold sick when they fell in love. And they left Ireland, the north of Ireland, and moved to Watford, where I was born. I was the 4th out of 5. My mother once said, if I'd have had you first, I might have stopped, which kind of sums it up. But I remember not feeling I had a particular place, in the family. I wasn't the eldest, I wasn't the firstborn son. I wasn't the firstborn daughter. I wasn't the youngest cute one who was my younger brother. And so I think I made up for it with a huge amount of noise. But I had a very strong mother, same colour hair as you, redhead, freckly, fiery,
all the
funny,
best people.
All the best, funny, very, very funny. And my father was very funny. It was never, the competition was, if you could be the wittier one, that's very Irish, to the extent that it was a bit cruel sometimes. But very strong family. But when I was 16, my mother died very suddenly of encephalitis. And my father was working at the time, and we were at home and didn't quite know what to do and how to manage the situation. And the doctor wouldn't come out. There's all the sort of things where you could have huge amounts of regret but you don't. And anyway, she died very suddenly. And I've got to race through this bit because there's so much that's just crazy. But my father...
You don't have to race through it.
Okay.
Take your time.
Well, it was just like that summer that she died, July. I just couldn't enjoy summers. I was always waiting for the autumn every year after that. Just summer to me just didn't feel like a place I wanted to be. But that summer she died was also the summer my sister left to go and train at UCH in London, that my brother started his hairdressing apprenticeship, and that my elder brother was off already in his second year at university studying. And so it just felt like a whole 3/4 of the family just went, and the central figure. And it was just as if someone had put the lights out. And my father just didn't, and this big, strong man who was huge, 6'2", and we always saw him as the strong man. He just crumbled, really, and made the terrible mistake of marrying someone within 18 months and married this old trout who was...
How do you feel about your stepmom, Mary?
She was an old trout. I could say a lot worse, because my father then died of a massive heart attack 9 months later and hadn't changed his will, and she inherited our family home and took it. I think trout's a very light word.
Yeah, I think you could do a lot worse.
We were without a family home. And, by this time I'm 19, Lawrence is 16. My elder siblings were renting different places. Joe hadn't left home, and we just had nowhere to go. And it's always the case, and one thing that I've just learnt in life, that often the people who have the least give up the most. And when my dad came over from Ireland, he had 2 friends, Don McInerney and Harry McCann, and they were the ones, and they put us up. Harry and his wife put us up in their 3-bedroom council house where they already had 4 kids, and we slept on the floor for about a year. And until we got back up and sort of could see some chink of light.
So you went from being the noisy, gobby one who had to shout to be heard in this big, noisy family, and you were probably barely cooked when your mum died. And all of a sudden, even before your dad died and you were homeless, you had to be sensible and responsible and, I guess, parent your brother.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I don't think I parented for him for 1 minute. And he equally, it became this kind of symbiotic together. It was him and I, really, because the others had gone, but they'd come back at the weekends. But it was just Lawrence and I, and my dad sort of crying and listening to Joseph Locke records in the front room. So we kind of just were there for each other and had to try and run the house and do the dinners. We didn't know how to cook. I never even listened to a word, my mother did around cooking. And so you stumbled through, and it just became a very painful existence. And I just, it just was a terribly dark time. And, but we got through it eventually. And I, to this day, the 5 of us are really, really close, because that's all we had was each other. And it made for a great love that continues today with siblings. Well, there's been I think one of the reasons, there's been no sibling rivalry. It's just been support and love. And that's a really unusual thing to be able to say, but I definitely have that.
That's really lovely, isn't it? I mean, do you think that having the emotional rug and support kind of pulled out from under you at quite not a really young formative age, but still, in your mid-teens, has that shaped your approach to your career and your emotional life as an adult?
Well, I write in the book, I sat with my anger long enough to realise it was grief, which was a line from C.S. Lewis. I got very angry, and I became, I think, a more brittle version than I would have been, and sort of wary of how I could get through and survive. I got into drama school because one of the great things that did come out of this, because when I went back to school after this, and I said the same to Lawrence, said he went back, the nuns were educated me in a convent, and my brother was at a school run by the brothers, which were all different priests. This, the Catholic crap that we all had to put up with. Well, not all of us. Been running away ever since. And none of us, all Lawrence got told was, if you ever feel a bit down, come and knock on the door. And I was much the same. There was no therapy. There was no one sitting. We didn't know what a therapist was. I hadn't even heard of one.
No such thing as grief counselling.
Yeah, so I think you just survive. And I'm not sure, of course, there was a huge amount of fear, that propelled me forward, but I'm not sure that's a good thing at all. And it took me a lot of years to get to a place where I go, I'm okay now, you know?
So it's just occurred to me, did you have no grandparents, aunts and uncles? Or was that because of the rift when they got together?
Well, no, we had aunts and uncles, but they were all in Ireland. And we didn't have grandparents. My mother's parents died. My father's side, I don't know. We started looking it up, and I'm not going to start telling now, but my sister said, whenever they ask you to do Who Do You Think You Are Again, don't. So my father was an only child, and we've been finding out about that. So there was no grandparents, no. There was just nothing but these gorgeous family friends, and who had kids of the same age, and still to this day one of them will still go and see gigs together. It's just rather lovely, you know. Family just takes different shapes. That's what you have to understand. It's about love and support, end of. And sometimes that doesn't come from your own family, but certainly there's a lot of it out there. And these people have been very significant in my life.
So you got into RADA, but you couldn't take that place up. So how did you end up doing visual merchandising from wanting to be on the stage?
Well, I got in and I couldn't. And then I just had no idea what to do. And my sister said, you've got to sort out something. And because I was low, and she was doing her nursing, and she said, you've got to. And then she started helping me look at, well, you're creative. You did art A-level, you did English. And I didn't want to, Lawrence and I were together and I couldn't imagine going far. So I went into this local college. I applied. We just had no idea, you know, and we read this sounds good. Visual merchandising and store design. Hadn't got a clue what it meant. And I turned up at Watford College, got in, was just terrible, I just didn't like it. I was unhappy. I wanted to be at drama school. I was here with people who wanted to design windows, and I certainly didn't. And the tutor said to me, you'll have no future in retail. I went, that's fine. Yeah. It's true. And she was right. I was angry, you know, I would just write things like, never mind the bollocks on the chairs, spray paint. And she said, you can't put that as a window. And I said, it's how I feel. It was just awful.
And the thing was, you could put it as a window.
Oh, yes, but that was later. And that was much later. But, you know, it was just a terribly lonely time, and I just wasn't happy at all. But then when it came to the final and we had to leave, I just woke up and thought, oh my God, and I saw all these people getting jobs. And I hadn't applied. I mean, I was really bad. They wouldn't give me a reference. I think I didn't even pass. And it was easy to pass. And I was just not there.
But you were depressed. I mean,
of course I was. I mean, I used to walk to college just crying. I know, but you don't think you are. And then it just got angry. And then, but theatre was always my thing. And I fell in love with this guy who I just was great. And we used to act together. And that was my expression to go on stage and get rid of this. But I thought I'd better do something. And then I decided, then I got all uppity that I was not going to work for any old retailer. I had to work for Harrods. I mean, I was the worst in the year. I'd failed everything, but I had to work for Harrods. And there was this lecturer, she was the head lecturer, bless her, and she was very small. And she used to finish, and this is well before mobile phones, and you know, didn't have a telephone at home because it would have been my Auntie Sheila's, and you're aware there was expense. So I'd written and got no jobs and gotten a no back from Harrods. And every lunch break, when she would go to lunch, she'd stand on a little stool and she'd put the key to the door above. And I'm 5'8.5", 9, and I'd be like, get the key down, go in, and I'd ring Harrods. And I rang Harrods. I'd ring through with personnel. No one had human resources then. And then the display manager. And I went on for weeks, and they kept on saying, we don't have a job. And I went on for 6 weeks solid. I'd make things up as to who I had to speak to. I'd find out the head stylist. And in the end, he just said, come in for an interview. And I turned up, and my sister was living in I used to get the train from Watford into Euston, and my sister was in the UCH, the nurses, and she said, come in to me, I'll dress you. And she put me in a little black Miss Selfridge pencil skirt and a white shirt because she worried that I'd be going off looking terrible. And I got the job, and that was the start.
It's amazing, isn't it? So were you at Harrods in the pre-Al-Fired years.
Yes, I was. Thank you very much. Phew.
God damn.
Phew, I'd had enough pain bodies to go through. Yes, it was the pre-Al-Fired years, but it was great. I found my sort of place. Everybody was just so, there wasn't any really strict rules of it. There was just these incredible big display teams. And in Harrods, everything was underground, Trevor Square. I mean, it was just like something out of Willy Wonka. People drove around, all the, the stock was kept underground in these huge warehouses. And we had a massive display studio where you could create and design stuff. And
all underneath Harrods?
All underneath Harrods. It's another world. Yeah, it's all another world, all underneath there. And it was just fantastic. You'd have a room this size just full of mannequins, and then you'd have reels of that. And I suddenly felt like I was in this sort of theatrical place where I felt at home, and it really worked. And then I got put on the weigh-in windows, and Malcolm McLaren knocked on the windows one day, and I thought lots of people used to knock on the windows and sometimes expose themselves when you're in the window. So you just ignored it and just thought, there's another old bloke doing it out there.
You didn't get flashed by Malcolm McLaren?
No, I didn't get by Malcolm. But he asked me if I'd like to do some of his stores, and I did, and then went freelancing. And then I met my future husband, who was a really clever, bright academic, and he was working at Unilever, and he said to me, stop mucking about, you're clever. And it really was. And he said, apply properly and do management training. You've got the creative side. And he found this ad we both found this ad in the Evening Standard. And I remember my sister coming around with him and working out how I was going to apply for this job, Topshop display manager. And I was 25, 1985, and we applied, and I got the job. And I'd never managed anybody, least of all myself.
But you had, you see.
Well, I suppose I had. Yeah, I'd taken on responsibility at home to an extent, but yeah, and that's where that really is where I started to feel, oh my gosh. Actually, if I'm honest, I'd fallen in love with him, and I was here at Topshop, and I felt the sun was shining on me. Actually, I think properly for the first time. Since my mother died. It probably took, about 10 years of that. Just you're like this. And then you go, I can live now. And I had a little rental flat above a shop in Notting Hill with my friend Mary. And he used to come at weekends because he was working for Unilever. And that's when it started to go, this is fun.
And you kind of found some sort of structure and some kind of security.
Yes.
I guess.
Yes. Friendships. Yeah. I was in the right place. I was in love. It was just, it was great years. Yeah.
This episode of The Shift is sponsored by Shopify. When I think back to starting The Shift, I can hardly believe I pulled it off. I mean, I knew nothing, and I had to figure it all out on my own. Scripts, scheduling, branding. When you're starting something new, it can seem like every time you tick something off your to-do list, 2 more things magically appear in their place. So finding a tool that simplifies the whole process can be a real game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Heinz to Allbirds and Skims. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify will help you build an online store to match your brand style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful tools to write product descriptions, headlines, and enhance product photography. Get the word out like you actually have a marketing team to create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from inventory to international shipping to processing returns, you name it. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 a month trial at shopify.co.uk/shift. Go to shopify.co.uk/shift. So all of a sudden you're running a team in Topshop and, Topshop Oxford Circus, as was RIP. Yeah. Those big windows, wheeling in Boy George and Marilyn. Yes.
I wasn't meant to. I bumped into them, and George and Marilyn said, we'll come in the windows, and we got a new album out. And I said, oh, that'll be fun, and I was doing some really fun stuff. It was, it was really taking off. It was the 80s. It was, just energized. And so Boy George and Marilyn turned up, and they spent so long in makeup. It was nearly closing time by the time they got in the windows. It was just crazy. But it just sparked, and it gave me just fun to do stuff. It was, you just styled the mannequins. It was crazy time, Nana Cherry's Buffalo, the music scene. We were the customer. And so it was really, really easy. And at the time, it was really moving from retail that sold stuff into really creating experiences. And the chairman at the time was Sir Ralph Halpin. I changed his name in the book, but he was also known as 5 Times a Night Ralph, but we won't get into that. I don't know if anyone remembers that time. These powerful...
Remember those, the News of the World.
Beautiful. And he became really quietly obsessed with the experience of retail. It was odd because I was the display manager that reported into the store manager, that reported into the regional manager, that reported into the sales directors, that reported into the global, but he would call down and ask me to come up to his office. Nothing happened. Yeah. And talk ideas. And he once said to me, go see what's happening in New York, and I want you to come back and show me. And in New York, young, I was 27, 20, and I'd get on a flight on my own. It was fantastic. And at that time, there was the Limited, Gap. It was all about the ambience, the music, the vibe. The department stores were amazing. Barney's, Bergdorf's. And it just felt like someone had just put an electric current through New York. And so when I got back, I was just, doing this all the way through the stores and loving it. And then one day he said to me, I'm going to move you and you're going to go to Harvey Nichols. I was just, a young girl in her 20s with this young team who were just having a ball of a time. And Harvey Nichols was this department store that was loss-making. And at the time, Al Fayed had bought Harrods, and he was sort of larging it round. And I think Halpin thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to own this store, and it needs redoing, and it needs to make profit. And he moved me across. I just did not want to go. It just was really, really painful and difficult when I first started. I just was like, I turned up looking like Cyndi Lauper, and everyone else was dressed like Princess Di. And it was Range Rovers. It was it was the Sloane Rangers. They really did talk like that, and wore sort of collars up and pearls. It was the late 80s, well before, just that time, probably 88, 89, 90 was the Sloane Rangers, and luxury was luxury for people with money. It wasn't anybody coming.
It was really old and posh, wasn't it?
Old and posh. And in those days, which is still to extent, there's a reason why Lord Marx says location, 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 because before internet or anything else, where you put your store was vital, and it was always a 5-mile radius was your customer. Well, 5 miles radius of Knightsbridge was Kensington, Chelsea and Sloane Square. And I had never seen money like this. I had never, ever encountered that people lived like this. They would have their drivers drop them off at the door, these women, and they'd potter in.
They probably could have walked, couldn't they?
Of course they could have walked. Yeah. Of course they could have. But they would have them drive. The driver would sit in the car. We'd be in the windows. The restaurant then was called Harvey's. It was called Harvey's. The short name for Harvey Nichols was Harvey's. And they'd go up and they'd be having a schooner of sherry at 11 o'clock on the banquette seatings of Harvey's. Sort of nod off to sleep and then wander off and buy and just drop extraordinary amounts of money that I had never experienced. I just remember looking at the price ranges and thinking, oh my Lord, it was completely and utterly different, completely.
So you had gone, it's not just that you'd gone from a customer that you knew and loved because you were, to a customer that you were a bit like, who is this person and what am I supposed to be doing for them? You'd gone from high street to luxury, which was a whole other thing. But you were also a young working class woman. And you weren't like mega senior at that point, but one of only 2 senior women.
Well, no, I wasn't even that mega senior. The senior woman was the buying director. That is your total big role, And I was head of display and visual merch. So I reported into the sales director who also sat on the board. So I was nowhere near the board. I was coming there to make the store look pretty, according to them.
They thought. What did they make of you? Because also they hadn't even taken you on, had they? You'd kind of been parachuted in.
Yes, the MD didn't really like me. And I could understand that because the chairman would ring me directly and say to me, what are you doing about, what windows you're doing? Or have you seen what's happening go down Sloane Street, or he would say to me, go to see what's happening in Paris. And I'd have to go to see the MD to tell him that the chairman had rang me, which is a really shit thing to do. But the MD was small, probably, I won't say what height he was, but he was, and I would...
But not 5'9".
He wasn't 5'9", and I'd take off my high heels and slip into flat shoes, and then I'd kind of make myself that shape, which was really uncomfortable because I knew he didn't like me very much. And it's very difficult to be in flow and be really dynamic when you know that there's that really awful energy. The buying director she spoke fluent French and was educated at the lycée. I didn't even know what the lycée was, but she used to close her eyes when she spoke, and she'd say things like, this is a couture season. I thought she was coughing, but she was saying, it's haute couture. And I didn't even know what haute couture was, or this is the cruise collection. And we're not talking P&O Ferries queues. We were talking where people went on proper cruises and would buy a whole collection. And I had to learn how to create those. And she knew I was uncomfortable. And I remember the very first scheme that I designed, and I was trying to second guess. And I was very influenced by Peter Greenaway's film, The Thief, the Cook. And it was very rich. And I thought, right, I'm going to do this. And it's going to be a big sort of scene I'm going to do through the windows. And I remember going to present it to her and the sales director, who I really did like, and the MD. And I remember saying, I'm doing this Baroque window. And she went, that's Rococo. And I felt so ashamed, because I didn't have that knowledge. She was wrong, actually. It wasn't. It was Baroque. But you felt, I'm not in this. I don't know the lingo. It was extraordinarily different. Yeah.
So what happened that made you go from feeling like an imposter and feeling like you didn't belong to feeling like, oh, screw you, I'm going to do what I think? Because you did get to that quite quickly, didn't you?
I did. It was less screw you and more, this is not going to work for me. I felt homesick for Topshop, but I was also scared, and I didn't want to lose this. And it was quite a recognised job. It's all men that did this job before. The fashion industry is full of men in powerful positions, but there was all display managers were all men across London. And I remember all the ones, the Liberty male head of display, the one at Selfridges, and I just did not want to let myself down. But something happened. I went to the gallery, the Whitechapel Art Gallery had opened, and it was really, really cool. And I used to, people don't do this now, but, I used to take time out in the day to go down to the art galleries, and I just look sometimes at people working today. No one does that. They still eat at their desks. And that was a really productive thing to do. And I used to just sort of leave a little note on my desk and go for a couple of hours. And I went to this exhibition, and sometimes, I don't know if you've ever been, it's a bit like when I went and saw Jenny Savile's work. There's work that you suddenly sit and you're in another space, and you're looking at this exhibition. And I was looking at this one, and what it was in the Nevada desert, they used to dump old cars. Just dump, that's where they were dumped, hundreds and hundreds of old cars. And these crazies, I don't know who they were, that were looking after the dumped cars and stacked them up like Stonehenge and called it Carhenge. And it was the most weirdest, crazy, amazing thing. And it was just all in this exhibition. It was black and white, and then you had, the sand of the desert. And I just had this moment of thinking, I'm going to use my windows like a gallery. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And the way it used to work was that I'd have to see the buying director, and she would take us through the collections, and you'd have to sit for this shirt I bought in this colour, and you'd sit for hours, and then you'd go away and create how to market that. So, and invariably it had to sit with it. Oh, this is a minimalist look. This is cruise. And I just thought, I didn't even think about what the collections were. I want to do this. And my team all went round these crazy garages and got car parts, and we got welders in to make it. And there's so many incredible artists and small, and we stacked this window with this car hinge. And it was stunning. And we put sand on it, and just one mannequin in each window. And it was just a bizarre, beautiful piece of work. And it got noticed. And I didn't get any comment at all from the buying director. The MD was not pleased because he thought I was going to do some sort of freeway with cars and a lovely blue sky and sunlight. And it was this crazy old broken down window. But what happened was I got a call from it was called Creative Review. And it was one of the sort of arts marketing magazines. And they said, we want to write about this window, which was really great. So it got noticed by the outside world. That little step pushed me forward. And then I got more of the outside world, not inside. It was like Vogue then wanted to write about stuff that I was doing. And actually we were, even then, and I did many, because you change windows every 6 weeks, the tourist companies used to ring and say, what's the next window? We've put it on our route around London. And it just kind of moved myself outside the codes of their retail into this space that was just about creativity to me, but actually it was magnetizing people to the store because it was just so, visually wonderful.
It's just really creating something that people wanted to be part of, isn't it? That kind of amazing experience.
Or they didn't. I remember when, which is often the case, when you get successful, they bring in the management consultants to analyze. Always great. Let's do some nice research. And I remember so many of the women saying, and they asked about the windows, and so many of the comments going, I don't understand what they are, but I really like it and I want to be there. And which is kind of art to a certain extent. You don't have to understand it, but if it feels good, it just was a great thing. Yeah.
Tell us about what must really have been the ultimate risk and deciding that you were going to take a punt on a TV show that you didn't know anything about. And, forget to tell your boss about as well.
Well, lots of things happened. And what happened with Harvey Nichols is that we made it into this kind of, certainly not just with me, but the buying director was very clever. And one of the things that happened is we couldn't get the big labels because we didn't have that big budget that Harrods had. And even Joseph, to a certain extent, he would get the really cool labels. And this was the time where, brands were launching left, right and center. It's very difficult to explain the speed, but, houses like Fendi, they were classic houses. Gucci, they were classic handbag houses. And now they were getting on this huge consumerist ride of luxury and brand. And they were bringing in designers like Tom Ford to redo Gucci and make it sexy because there was just this wealth of money that was coming. And designer was going younger, and labels were, the reason I called the book I Shop, Therefore I Am was because Barbara Kruger, the artist at that time, did this exhibition in the Serpentine where she just put out these incredible big statements, which were indictments on the consumer society that we were absolutely part of. And Harvey Nichols, because we were launching young new designers and giving them free space and catwalk shows, and we'd now opened up really cool restaurant and a bar, which nobody had done. Nobody had opened up a bar in a department store. I mean, normally you've got the Place to Eat in John Lewis where you've got a milkshake. I think they're still doing that, aren't they? But nobody had opened up a restaurant bar. And so it became this place where people were hanging out. And then one day I was with a few of the designers, British fashion designers, Betty Jackson, Jasper Conran and John Rocher. And I can't remember, we were doing a shoot for something. And Betty says, she used to dress Jennifer Saunders, and Jennifer wore a lot of Betty's stuff, and they were friends. And Betty says, don't tell anyone, but Jennifer's writing this comedy, and it's based on the fashion world, and it's really based on Lynn Franks. Now, Lynn Franks was the biggest PR of the time. You'll remember her. Scary, wasn't she?
Very scary.
Where were you at the time when Lynn was around? Were you in sort of...
Oh, somewhere too lowly for her to bother with me, that's for sure.
But she was massively, like she was the PR for everybody that matters. She started in fashion with Catherine Hamnett, and she ended up, you know, the PR for the Pet Shop Boys, for Annie Lennox, obviously Jennifer and Dawn French. And the thing about Lynn was, whoever she represented, she wore their collections, whether it suited her or not. So, and she had this really big house. She'd made a fortune. And the thing is, I really liked her. She's soulful as well. She'll just go into anybody and ask you to do anything, but she's also one that will really support you. But she had this huge house in Maida Vale on Blomfield Road. And she would say, she was the publicist for Harvey Nichols when I started.
Before you sacked her.
I did sack her. I did. She got upset and then she said, can I keep my discount card? And I, of course you can, Liz.
And there is the fashion industry in a nutshell.
But she had this big house, and downstairs in the kitchen, you know, she would hold her meetings. So when you see Ab Fab and they're always running downstairs into the kitchen, it's all based on Lynn's house. She also had a big Buddha in there, which used to sit sometimes when you went round. And there was a scene I remember where Jennifer just went, make me more money, make me more money. Hilarious. Anyway, it was based on Lynn, but don't tell Lynn. And Betty said, I'm advising her on what designers to wear. And the designers at the time were very much the ostentatious ones of Moschino, you know, Lacroix. Lynn would be representing them. And I said, will she be filmed? Where's she filming on location? I said, do you think she'll film in Harvey Nichols? Because at the time, Selfridges had really followed what we were doing and started to do some really cool, edgy stuff. And they were doing it really well. And I thought, I'd be so jealous if they filmed in Selfridges, because they were doing some cool stuff. And Betty said, well, ask her. I'll bring her in. So she brought her in. And Jennifer Saunders just was so laconic. You know, you think comedians are going to be, hey, this is fun. I said, oh, can you tell me about the show? Not really. It was really difficult. And I remember she just would actually even give me eye contact. It was very difficult. And I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, and Betty was making up and saying, oh, you know, it's going to be fun. I'm sure it's going to be one of Jen's. I said, look, if you want to film, you can film anytime in the store, anytime in the windows. They've become very known and famous. And she's like, yeah. Didn't give me anything. And I said, well, just let me know, because honestly, Jennifer, if you're going to talk about the designers and you're getting the right ones like Lacroix or Moschino or Dolce & Gabbana, which had just launched, you've got to talk Harvey Nichols. And she said, okay, I'll let you know. That was it. And then 2 weeks later, she just rang me and said, we want to film next week. I said, okay. And we all stayed behind. Now, I remember going down, it was late. I hadn't told the MD, which was a bit of a problem. And he'd gone and it was late and they were filming. And I went downstairs. And at that time, Joanna Lumley was one of those very sort of classic, fabulous actresses. She was purdy. And I just remember looking out onto Sloane Street and Joanna Lumley was there with a bottle of Bollinger, a fag in her hand, and a wig at an ankle like this with makeup. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? You know, this is going to be terrible. I didn't sleep for about 3 months before it came on air. But it did, and they mentioned Harvey Nicks, and it just overnight, it kind of made it countrywide.
That's where Harvey Nicks came from.
Harvey Nicks, yeah, and we didn't
Harvey
call
Nicks,
it that.
sweetie.
Yeah, she's going to Harvey Nicks, sweetie. And so everybody started then calling it Harvey Nicks. It was always Harvey's beforehand. It was a very good gamble.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
It was like you were on this incredible upwards trajectory. Then if it feels like to you guys listening to this that I'm doing a handbrake turn, I kind of am, because I've got my eye on the clock. You had 2 babies and then you left. What made you leave when you're on such an enormous high?
Well, a couple of things. There was no other women who had babies that were on the board. I got onto the board, and I remember that felt like I was it just something shifted in me on that. But that really wasn't the reason. So I think there was a bit of that to an extent where your whole body and you change completely and where your energy is. And instead of those crazy hours where you're staying back up night, you're like, I just want to also be home with these children. So that changed. But the really big change was this. And I think we could write books on this across business, is what gets you when you're loss making is the risk taking and the ideas, right? That great business, and particularly the industry that I know, great retail business, is someone having great ideas and going, this is what I want to show to the public. This is what I want to give to people. And we did that. We were loss making and suddenly we were super profitable and opening up across the country. And then what happens is the caretakers shove the pirates out of the way. That's a good analogy. I like that one.
Yeah. And
in come the money guys who go, okay, so we got to increase by 15, 20%. And they look in the rearview mirror, what you did last year. And the controls start to go in. And I used to find myself having to go and sit with this very big board now, because we were a very big business, and present window ideas. And I remember one day, it was a very low point, when the finance director said, my wife didn't like your last windows. Now, I'd seen his wife. And I shouldn't have been bothered. But I was. Because it was the way that I then had to work. And there's another thing I wrote in the book is I never had the time. I'd have to sit and present. Never did a finance director come to me, the creative director, say, listen, I'm planning the budgets. I'd love your input on the numbers. Never happens. And what really did happen, and we've seen in business always, is money, power comes into play. We're seeing it now. We're seeing it with Trump and those tech bros. This is the people who can make huge amounts of money, and we know how to control it operationally. But they push aside the risk, the ideas, or that you have to not necessarily push them all aside, but you have to put a very clear business logic as to why you were doing. And truly, there wasn't logic to what I did. I knew that I wanted Harvey Nichols, and we'd created this funky, innovative, slightly witty. We didn't take ourselves too seriously. You know, Harrods was all glam and big. And I knew that everything I did was within that sort of, we'd call it a strategy, but it was within that feeling. And I just found myself having to, and I did that Christmas window, which nearly put me over the edge, because I decided one Christmas that the money that we spent on windows, which was pretty vast sometimes, I thought, what if I give that to charity and we leave the windows empty? And getting that through, I remember I nearly gave birth to my child, my daughter. Literally, it was the most stressful. And there was sort of that feeling of, this is on your shoulders if this doesn't work. And bless them, the old Evening Standard covered it and put it front page, and I was like, thank you for that in the end. But it was that. And I just remember one day thinking, I could do this myself. I just don't want to be under that structure anymore. And it was time to move on.
There's a chapter in the book that's called Money Men with Balls and Bullshit Do Really Well. And I think we've all been there, haven't we? We've all been there. But it's interesting, the number of women that I speak to on the Shift podcast who get to kind of into their 40s, maybe a little bit older, and they just suddenly reach a point where they just cannot put up with that for one more second, even though they've put up with it probably for the previous 2 or 3 decades. Did you feel like that? Was there an element for you of, I cannot make these men any more money?
There was times when it was just so joyful. I thought I was going to make more money. Yeah. That's what I thought. I thought, wow, because it really was successful. And the team that got it together, that we were all part of, had really worked hard. So I thought, oh, wow, I'm going to come into, this is, they floated part of the business. I thought, wow, we're going to have a bit of money here. And the options were to be tied in for 5 years in shares. And I just remember thinking, It just wouldn't go. And I think, the biggest mistakes I've made in my life is when I haven't listened to my instinct, and my instinct was to say, move on. And, it was one of the best things I did. It changed and took me into so many different areas and TV and stuff that I would never have been done if I had stayed and not worked for myself in the end.
What was it like, just quickly, the TV, going from, like we said at the beginning, being industry famous to being on the street famous? Mary with the strong opinions and the sharp red bob and recognised. And how did that feel?
It felt okay. It's interesting because I had this incredible producer who discovered me. I went on Richard and Judy one day because I used to do this column on shops. She just spotted me and rang and said, listen, I've got this TV show that I want to do. And I said, and she said to me something, and it's true. She said, all the people, she discovered Jamie Oliver, Gordon Ramsay. And she said, everybody that I discovered on TV, they all said, yeah, I thought I'd end up here. And I kind of did. It's a weird thing. You just think, oh, yeah, that's right. You don't think, I mean, the weird bit is when you very first go out. I remember parking my car and someone goes, all right, left a bit, Mary, back a bit. And I was like, who is this guy? I'd never known him, but he'd seen me on TV the night before. And I remember those were sort of odd things. But apart from that, it just felt quite natural.
Yeah, because you were suddenly, like we were talking just now, you were suddenly Mary. You didn't need a surname. We all knew who you were. Is that why you changed your hair?
What like this?
Yeah, so you weren't Mary anymore.
No, that was lockdown.
Right. I really want to ask you millions more questions, but I'm going to ask you the questions I always ask at the end. What is your emotional age?
Probably 38.
Why 38?
I know it sounds good. I think
that's why I asked.
I think, I don't know. It's a difficult one. I just think I set up my business then. I sort of got a bit of life under my belt. I had my kids. I think it's kind of there. I don't know. Maybe mid-40s. I don't know.
You're giving me a bad face.
I just think I'm the same age all the way through. I just think I'm the same age. I just feel I don't feel I'm 65. But I am 65 and I don't want to not be 65, but I just feel I'm the same kind of person, I think.
If that's what 65 looks like, I'll have that. Thank you. Quick book recommendation.
I read a really beautiful little one, very quick. It was called The Room Above the Shop, I think it was. I just read it last night in one go. It's a small book. It was excellent, and I can't remember who it's by. I'll find out afterwards.
What advice would you give younger women?
Don't have a 5-year plan. It is the biggest load of bullshit ever.
Excellent.
It is true. Whoever says, where do you want to be in 5 years? I just about get through the week. Just be present and it just happens. It'll be guiding that 5 year. If anyone asks you that, just walk out of the interview.
What's your superpower?
Do you know what I do think it is? I think in work, I think my superpower is I'm very good at sort of knowing what that next cultural thing is going to be. It just comes and I'll ring my team and I'll be like, and I'll go on for ages. And I just have this feeling of what's happening. And it's not necessarily fashion. I'm talking, but those sort of cultural movements I just love. And I love sort of harnessing that and knowing what kind of will be the next thing that will work.
Yeah. And last one, how many fucks do you give?
How many what? What did she say?
I did say that. How many fucks do you give? How much do you care, Mary?
That's really interesting. I give a lot of fucks. I think life deserves really great big fucks because it's just extraordinary. I think that we're here tonight, that we're together. I just think it's rich. I give big fucks on that side, and I think that's positive fucks. And I really don't give a fuck about the far right, though we all have to talk about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.